who came before the Anasazi? And how did people live before there was corn? Ancient images carved on the canyon walls seem to tell us of an older, legendary time before farming, when the hunting way of life first drew people into these barren canyons. To get enough to eat, the hunters led a mobile existence, sheltering in caves for a few months of the year before moving on. This was one of their stopping places. Old Man Cave near Blanding, Utah. Here, Phil Geib, an archaeologist working for the Navajo Nation, and Dale Davidson of the Bureau of Land Management, direct a team of volunteers searching for elusive traces of those early hunters, known to archaeologists as the archaic culture. It's a rare opportunity. The archaic is one of the great unknowns in southwestern archaeology.
If you think about the number of archaic sites that anybody has dealt with here in the Southwest, the number in this part of the Southwest is like 3 or 4 sites total. You know, and we've how many Pueblo sites have been dug here? Thousands and thousands. So it's a really, to work in a place like this, it adds a real important dimension.
In part, it's a preservation problem, too. Here we have wonderful preservation. We're in a shelter, and these early deposits have been totally preserved. They haven't been flushed away. A site like this, of this age, 8,000 years ago, if it was out in the open surface out here in the valley, has a good chance of either eroding away or being buried by other deposits, so it's totally invisible to archaeologists, and we have a hard trouble locating those kinds of sites. Here, the material is preserved, and it's preserved so well that we have organics, yucca and grass fiber that date back 8,000 years ago, or about 8,000 years ago.
It was an unusually well-preserved object that first alerted them to the potential of the site. On a visit to the vaults of a local museum in 1988, they spotted a sandal woven from yucca fiber that had been collected from the surface of the cave. They had once suspected that the site must have remarkably intact remains from the archaic. But when they hiked to the cave, they found it riddled with the holes of collectors and pot hunters.
As you can see all around us, this part of Old Man Cave has been very heavily disturbed by looters in the past. Maybe as long ago as before the turn of the century, in the 1880s and 1890s. Maybe only a matter of a few years ago.
The 1880s and 90s were the heyday of the collectors who ransacked sites to fill museums back east. Richard Wetherill and his 4 brothers were Colorado cattle ranchers who led an expedition in 1893 into the tortuous canyons of Utah's Grand Gulch. At a single cave, Wetherill unearthed 97 skeletons in 4 days, shipping them back east to museums where the bones still lie boxed up, virtually unstudied to this day. Though his methods were crude, Wetherill was one of the first to record his finds with notes and photos. And he realized that the Anasazi were not the first visitors to the site.
There are some of the early relic hunters that I like to think of as archaeological explorers rather than vandals, because they were practicing the archaeological science of the day, if you will. We wouldn't do science like that. We wouldn't do archaeology like that anymore. But I think that they're in a different class than people who were just here to get some pots to sell, or some blankets, or all the other wonderful things these sites contain.
While pot hunters still plunder dozens of sites in the Southwest each year, archaeologists have changed their methods drastically. New remote sensing technology allows them to plan exactly where to dig beforehand and see beneath the soil without even lifting a spade.
Home Buddies, weekdays at 4 and 7 on the Learning Channel.
The 1994 Nissan Sentra with an airbag, cruise control, air conditioning, and a 4-speaker cassette stereo cost $2,000 less than a comparably equipped Toyota Corolla. $2,000. Just think, you can use that to buy your first tank of gas. Should you prefer a lease, you can now get a Sentra for $189 a month with $500 down for 36 months.
Hey, MCI friends and family basic customers, want to see how you could save more with AT&T? Look, you're currently getting discounts to just one person or a limited list of people. But look at how many people you call. Well, if you spend $30 a month on long distance, AT&T will give you 15% off to everyone you call. Now, write down this number. It's how to get 15% off to anyone, anywhere, anytime. So call AT&T now, and you could save to everyone.
Saturdays on the Learning Channel, witness the beauty and majesty of Europe's great castles. Experience fantastic escapes to romance and enchantment. Discover hideaways that captivate your imagination and savor gourmet cuisine that's light and delicious. It's your evening of fine living, Saturday nights beginning at 8 on the Learning Channel. Sponsored by the wine cellars of Ernest and Julio Gallo, who invite you to try a very special Chardonnay.
America's favorite surfing group, the Beach Boys.
I wish they all could be California girls. Wouldn't it be nice if we were older, then we wouldn't have to wait so long?
The Beach Boys' 22 greatest hits on compact disc or double-length cassette for only $9.99. That's over an hour's worth of music.
Help me right now, yeah, get her out of my heart. Well,
Then audition other classic rock albums. Satisfaction is guaranteed.
she got me rocking and a rolling, rocking and a reeling, bobber and pop.
Here's how to order.
To order, use your credit card and call 1-800-346-3800 or send $9.99 for one double-length cassette or one compact disc, plus $3.50 shipping and handling to Beach Boys, Department 1, Richmond, Virginia.
Today's archaeology is indeed different from the old days. High technology will allow Dale and Phil to see beneath the soil before they even lift a spade, thereby allowing them to avoid disturbing human remains. First, they stake out a reference grid that will help them pinpoint the location of any buried features seen by this device. It's an antenna that transmits a ground-penetrating radar signal into the earth. Similar in principle to an earthquake detector, but with a much higher frequency signal, which will bounce off anything unusual underground.
For example, if a pit has been dug and then afterwards covered up, and the ground-penetrating radar passes across that point, the place where the pit had been covered will be different from the surrounding soil that has not been disturbed. Once the natural soil profile is disturbed, it stays disturbed, and it's something that the GPR instrument system can find and determine.
So the machine picks up reflections from disturbed soil, buried rocks, objects, or bones, and the fraction of a second it takes the signal to bounce back tells the machine how deep the object or layer is. The result? A continuous map of the hidden world beneath their feet. They can review the map on the spot, but in a computer lab, the radar record is even more revealing.
This particular line here, you can see the normal geology, and again there's a disturbed zone, and this disturbed zone has the normal geology above it, so it's another place that was disturbed a long time ago. The geology had time to settle in above it, and this is something that should be dug up by the archaeologists and investigated. It's probably a very interesting undisturbed site. The pot hunters haven't found it yet.
So like eyes beneath the soil, the radar helps them plan the dig. They know in advance where to expect ancient pits, burials, or pot hunters' holes. Early morning in Combe Wash. It's already 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and it will be 100 by noon. A team of volunteers from the Four Corners School begins the quarter-mile trek up to Old Man Cave. But there are always surprises once they finally begin to probe the soil. The exceptionally dry conditions in the cave have preserved materials that would normally be destroyed, such as fragments of an 8,000-year-old sandal woven from yucca, nearly identical to the one in the museum that led Phil to the site in the first place.
So here's a sandal fragment. Now that we took it out of the deposit, there's still sediment underneath here, ashy charcoal sediment. And it's actually resting on top of a mono fragment, something they would have used to grind small seeds with. They threw it out in the trash. It's just part of the trash deposit. And it's just fortuitous that it's resting on the mono. You can see how the loop here is draped over the surface. Very open sort of sandal. They usually packed it with grass or juniper bark to make it a little more comfortable. Quick to make, though. An experienced person could make one of these in, one sandal in perhaps about 10 minutes or so. So it's sort of a disposable technology.
But what was life really like for the people who wore the sandals 8,000 years ago? R.G. Matson of the University of British Columbia is an authority on these ancient desert dwellers.
The archaic people here, the ones who lived here 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, made their living by hunting and gathering. They probably hunted a wide range of animals. We have remains of deer, for instance, in this cave. And they also gathered a number of different things.
To recover animal bones, seeds, and other evidence of diet, the excavators carefully sift each bucket load through a fine mesh screen, even though it kicks up a choking dust.
The one gathering thing that we have a lot of evidence for is spirabolus, or drop seed grass. And the other two sites of this age also have lots of evidence of drop seed grass. So that was one of their staples. They probably moved very frequently over the landscape so that they never stayed in an area more than a few weeks at a time. So they cleaned out the resources in an area, the animals, the plant resources, and then they'd move on to another area. But they probably make fairly regular annual rounds.
Surprisingly, clues about the archaic people even come from the vegetation surrounding Old Man Cave today. Nancy Coulomb of the U.S. National Park Service is a botanical expert who is comparing present-day plants with the evidence of those consumed by the cave dwellers 8,000 years ago.
The big question for us is, what was life like for these people? And a big chunk of that life is going out looking for plants. And so we need to know how far on a daily basis did people have to travel to go get lunch and dinner.
The remains of ancient lunches and dinners are right here in the dirt. The excavators are probing a prehistoric hearth. They will sift it for traces of ancient pollen and seeds.
So we are picking up the results of prehistoric accidents in the kitchen. And by looking at lots of those accidents in different hearths all across a site and then all across a region, we can determine fairly well what people are cooking. These people had a tremendous impact on their environment, and they created the environment to some extent that we see around us today. They ripped up whole plants. It's really common. What you find whole grass clumps that they have ripped out of the ground and brought back to their cave, and they then extracted the seeds there. They were not exactly ecologically minded.
So did they thoughtlessly strip whole canyons of their vegetation and then move on? Or did they carefully protect or even propagate the wild grasses so crucial to their survival? Someday soon, science may have the answer.
With Potato Perfect, you can get tender, flaky, oven-baked potatoes in about half the time. Potato Perfect, the quick potato baker, by Mr. Coffee.
There are many, many infants and young children who suffer from malnutrition. Children underweight and possibly undersized. In this country, there's just no excuse for that kind of tragedy. We're grateful for American Express card members' support. Every time they use the card, they're not just going to be buying a meal or an airline ticket or an appliance or a CD player or what have you. They're going to be buying a little piece of the fight against hunger.
You can help. Use the American Express card to join the charge against hunger till December 31st.
In about 10 minutes, you can either begin making fresh brewed iced tea, or you can begin drinking it. The iced teapot by Mr. Coffee. What'll he think of next?
Throughout the centuries, there have been the accepted facts, the conventional wisdom, and often it all turned out to be totally wrong. Then the visionaries stepped in to uncover the truth and expand human knowledge. Now, in a 10-part series, James Burke follows their search a series of discoveries that gave us our modern world. Join him and relive the day the universe changed. Sundays at 8 on the Learning Channel.
What if all the knowledge in the world suddenly appeared in the palm of your hand? With the Sony Data Discman player, you'll have access to a personal, portable library with volumes of information all stored on tiny discs like this. Press a button and watch the screen come alive with exciting graphics and text from hundreds of educational titles. And now, for a limited time only, when you order your Sony Data Discman, you'll also receive over 200 volumes of Monarch Notes, the Oxford Dictionary and Thesaurus, and a 26-volume set of Compton's Concise Encyclopedia, completely contained on these 3 tiny discs. So pick up the phone and put the knowledge of the world at your fingertips.